So good morning to everyone. My name is Katalin Oborny. I am from the Hétfa Research Institute, and I am just waiting for my head to officially open this webinar.
Thank you, Katalin. So good morning, everyone. Let me welcome you on behalf of Profeedback Cost Action. I'm Gábor Balázs, the chair of the Profeedback Cost Action and also the managing director of the grant holder of this action, Hétfa Research Institute. And it's my duty to open this webinar today. And until I'm speaking, I hope that more and more participants will attend in the meeting. Some words about our cost action. We are in the last stage of the cost action, the fourth year, which we are very close to the end of this action. Profeedback cost action is focusing on policy evaluation, methodology topics and issues related to better policy creation. More than 300 members existing or working on this Profeedback cost action, mainly researchers and practitioners. And during these 4 years, we recognized the emerging issue of the gender issue, how to integrate gender into our researches and our research setup. With our gender research specialist, Katalin Oborny, we make a research on it with our members. We produce a policy brief on it and publish it very soon. And we decided that based on this knowledge, we share our experiences, how to integrate research and projects, how to integrate gender and intersectionality questions on it with this webinar, which is not just for Profeedback members, but as far as I know, more and more people from other cost actions are joined us to discuss this issue. So I hope that you will have a fruitful discussion today, and I give the floor to Katalin to lead this webinar.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for opening this webinar. First, I would like to say a few words about the technicalities, how we planned to deliver this webinar. So basically, we were thinking that this is not a webinar, but this is a workshop. And I hope this was announced it like a workshop, because not really, but so then this is the time I am announcing that this subject, to discuss this subject, require really discussion among the people, because I think it would be really boring if I would speak for 1.5 hours. So I would like to turn this webinar into a workshop. So that's why after a while we will give everyone the permission to be a panelist. In this way, you will appear with your voice and with your screen, but of course you will be you still have this. So you can still switch on or switch off your screen and mute or unmute yourself. But I planned reflection talkings, and I planned a small exercise for you as well. Another thing, which is not more about the technicalities, so it's when speaking about, so the topic of this webinar is how to integrate the gender dimension into research and project implementations. So for doing the real job, so to integrating a gender dimension, we would need to see like concrete researches, or in the case of this project, concrete evaluation methods or evaluation cases, which we're not doing in this workshop, but rather to provide you like a general overview or what is required from the researchers, those who are implementing a project, when we are speaking about how to integrate the gender dimension into research or in during a project implementation. Which is two very, it can be seen very distinctive area, but it's really connected. When we are participating in this webinar as a project. So we can always speak about, in a certain project, how do you integrate the gender dimension? So, okay, let's start with me sharing my presentation, which I need to have a request. I am asking my colleague to provide me. Okay. Okay, first of all, I just would like to share this information that integrating gender dimension became important in the cost actions by speaking about using gender equality plans in the cost actions. And it's not that long time ago. It was started in 2022 when a working group within the cost action program was established, and they started to draft sample gender equality plans based on those recommendations, what probably you are already familiar under the Horizon programs, Horizon projects. And so since then, there is a lot of material, but you can reach on their website, and there you will see a draft gender equality plan. You will see recommendations. They sometimes organize workshops and webinar, and they even have a community on Basecamp. And I think all this information can be found on their website, because they have a dedicated subpage for gender equality on the COST website. So let's start when the cost action. So when this topic appeared under the cost action, because I think this is a good starting point. So when they started to talk about what gender equality or what gender dimension means for a project, they started to talk about that reaching gender balance within a research networks has an importance, which is evaluated. So those who are submitting proposals know that which is evaluated at the proposal stage. And then another highlight is that promoting women to leadership positions in the actions, it's an importance. So this is something what can be included in the gender equality plans, both as an action and as a goal. And they already started to measure the percentage of the women in leadership position, and they set up a goal, which is the 50% of leadership position occupied by women. And it's not that much to reach in the cost action, because they are almost there. So it's when this data came out, it also showed that the 48% of leadership position are already occupied by women. But what is the real challenge in it is that the number of chairs, so those positions which are the highest position filled by the women, but it's already increasing within the cost action programs. So this is a good starting point to see that when we are talking about gender equality, it's let's say the easiest way is that we examine that where the women stand within an organization. But this is not really what is required when we are speaking about gender dimension integration into the research. So this is only a very first step that we see that what is the percentage of women and men in terms of gender, either in a sample or either among the researchers participating in a research team. And in this next slide, I know it's a lot, but I just would like to show you that what is like the official definition of what is gender dimension means, the inclusion or the integration of sex and gender dimension. So first of all, as you see that the European Commission speaks about the gender equality plan, and this webinar is not about talking about the gender equality plan, but it's really connected with the integration of gender dimension, because in the gender equality plan it's recommended to consider 5 five topics of or area to target in the gender equality plans. And among these five topics, one is the integration of gender dimension into research. So this is something what is required for the from the researchers to deal with it within, or the institution, of course, within the gender equality plan. But in overall, there is a requirement, and there are already reports and recommendation direction about that this that in order to increase the excellence of researches, it's mandatory to deal with this inclusion of the gender and sex dimension. And here you see a definition. So it says the inclusion of sex and gender dimension means that differences, whether biological or social, are taken into account in research and teaching. And what you see here is that it's not only gender dimension mentioned, but the sex as well. So when we are speaking about gender dimension, we have to consider both the sex and the gender factors as well, which means that you can, as a researcher, you have to consider that how and to what extent you need to perform a sex analysis or gender analysis, and how to connect these two type of analysis. And what you also see here, it's mentioned that account in the research. So this is what the job here is, to consider that what it means that during the research or for the whole research, you have to integrate the gender dimension. But first, before we start to speak about that, how can we do it? So what the actual methods or practicalities to do it? We have to always consider that why is it important to integrate gender as a dimension? And maybe this question is important for you if, for instance, if you have to convince other researchers in your teams, institutions, because I think this is still an ongoing, I wouldn't say debate, but this is, I think, an ongoing discussion in many research team countries, that why we need to deal with it, especially if you're not researchers from the field of humanities. So because maybe it seems more easier, let's say, for a sociologist to integrate the gender dimension in their research than, let's say, for a physicist. Okay, so the problem here is that so how the thinking started, that there is an importance, there is a relevance to integrate the gender dimension. So it's come from the experience that in many research, the sample was taken as an ordinary crowd. But in reality, there was no specific sample from the ordinary crowd. So which means the crowd involving all kind of different groups. And the research ended up examining only usually white young males. So this was the initial problem, back in the 60s, when certain researchers started to face this issue. So this can be like a starting point for you to think that why is it important to integrate gender and dimension in research and the project implementation. So at this point, I would like to stop a little bit and ask you to provide some suggestions in the chat. So this is the question, that why do you think it is important that researchers are asked to integrate the gender dimension, the gender factors in the research and the project? And you can type your answers into the chat. So I will just wait for 1 minute to see that what are the answers. And let's see if I receive any answer at all. Okay, thank you. So the answers are coming, yes. So for instance, the people experience may be different along the gender lines. Yeah, so we experience differently. It's always maybe the best examples, those coming from biology or medical sciences. So for instance, the pain is really experienced in different ways, or we can say perceive. So the pain is perceived along the gender lines differently. It's matter of justice as research should benefit all in the society. Yes, exactly. Yes, so thank you for the answers. I also collected some insights for this. So this is what I found from different papers, webinars. So it's other than that, this is an obligation. So I just would like to say a little bit about that. Yes, of course, it's an obligation because it's required from the institution, from the researchers that you have to do it because this is a requirement for receiving the fund. And either to receive a fund, you have to provide a good answer under the questions related to gender dimension. So that's one thing. But so for the society, when we're speaking about the society, you have to think of that there are different groups, as it was stated, as it was shared along the gender lines, and these groups have different experiences. These groups have different needs. These groups have different opportunities, and all these have to be encountered when planning a research. It's also important that integrating gender dimension is simply an equality or a justice question. So if you want to improve the inclusiveness, the fairness, if you want to improve the equal opportunities, you have to consider the gender dimension in the research. It can lead into rethinking your research question, your research priorities, and of course the outcomes. And it's also not because we can reconsider our research questions, but when including a gender analysis, any kind of method that incorporates gender as a dimension, as a factors, or a variable to explore, or as an explanation, you will end up different results for women and men and other subgroups under women and men. So the end result can be very different, and as it is defined in a certain under the Horizon project, for instance, so it's not only the research that matters, but it if you apply gender dimension into your research, you will end up at gendered innovation. So an innovation, which means that it considers that the end results, that's why for instance, the products can be, so different products can be produced to women and men. And one of the best example came from the research which was about the heart attacks. This image shows that after a while there was only symptoms described, which describe the symptoms of men who suffered heart attacks. And after a while, health research started to focus on women as well. And it was discovered that women suffer from different symptoms when they are experiencing heart attacks. And as you can see, it's slightly different for women and men. So this is what is meant on gendered innovation, that we people we have biological sex and we have a gender, and we are different roles, relations, we have different experiences based on our gender, it have different effects in a medical treatment. So this is an example for this. Sometimes it's more easy to find examples from the field of biology and health, but everything can be gendered. So it's not that that there are fields that cannot be considered, because the results, when you think of that, what can be the results of our research for the society, then at least in this phase of the research, you can consider what is the gender dimension. But of course, there are researches where it's really hard to think of how the gender dimension can be included. And it's really like I'm admitting that in social researches, it's much easier to incorporate this gender dimension. Okay, so a next step when we have to think of how to integrate this gender dimension is that we have to think of the three basic concepts. And because I don't know who are joining this webinar, I can recognize some of the names, and I know that they are familiar with this gender, sex, and intersectionality concept. Let's call them concept for this time, because it's often called as concepts in the papers, webinars, speaking of gender dimension inclusion. So first of all, you have to, as a researcher, you are differentiating between gender and sex, which doesn't mean that they are not interacting with each other. So basically the gender, so let's just like say it aloud. So we are speaking about socially constructed roles, behaviors, expressions, performances, identities of girls, women, boys, men, and other gender diverse people. And it can be distinguished from the sex. But that's already a very interesting question, because in the literature, we can speak about that sex is also assigned. So not only gender is sex assigned, but just to stay on, let's say, on a more easiest way, let's speak about that. Here we differentiate between gender and sex, and our job is to see how they are interconnected in your research. So obviously sex is what we all learned in high school, that the biological sex is about the attributes of the all kind of physical features. You can think of the chromosomes, the genes, the hormones, and the anatomy, of course. And just to mention it, that the biological sex is more complicated than being a female or male, which of course needs to be considered as well. And it's only a small percentage of the whole humanity is intersex, but considering that we are almost 8 milliard people living in the world, or maybe it's already more, it's not only just a small fraction of people are intersex, so it needs to be considered as well. And what I also learned about it, I'm not really into in how to do sex analysis and want to consider, because I am not in that field of research. But as I know, it matters not only so not only the biological sex, but it also it can be also important, like for instance, if in a medical research, so it's not only like animals or humans are examined, but like, let's say a tissue is examined, and it's also important to know that this tissue is originating from a male or a female. Okay, so a lot can be talked about the biological sex as well, but let's go back to the gender. So about gender, it's also important to know that it's something which is really changeable through societies, and even also if we are speaking about individuals as well. It can be vary through time, through age, places. So it's really are connected into what we have learned, what we are learning, what we are expecting, what we are expected by the society. And when doing a gender analysis, it's so the first step, what is already considered an integration of the gender dimension, that you distinguish what this is like something which is like a very first step, that you make a gender distribution in your sample. But other than that, if you are speaking about integrating gender, it's more that you are speaking of connections, you are speaking of that how society or organizations shaping gender. And on gender, here we can mean a lot of things. The main so the main way of integrating gender is that when we are talking about gender norms, gender identities, or gender relations, or simply we are speaking about the gender social roles in the society, so what is expected of women and men. Gender is really like a constructing factor. So you can connect it to economy, products, or habits. You can connect it to production, or the way how we fight against the climate change. So it can be all gendered. And then I also mentioned that the other term or concept we have to talk about it, we have to consider is the intersectionality. Maybe I wrote too much on intersectionality here, but this is very simple what intersectionality mean. It's not that simple to examine, to study it. So basically, when we want to consider intersectionality, it means that we have identities, and our identities, it's a multiple social phenomenon. So we are not only shaped or defined by our gender, but by multiple other factors. So, for instance, the race, class, the culture, the place where you live, your age, ability, and all these different factors, they are adding up, but not like by one. So it's not that if you consider 10 different factors, then you can show that the discrimination is higher. So they are really like overlapping, or they are independent. They are forming an interdependent system. I think it can be like it's easy to understand that what we are speaking of it, but it's really difficult to show in a research that which factor is stronger, for instance. There could be some ways when we can, when it's easier to show, for instance, if you are studying a certain group of women with an ethnic background, it's then easier to show, but usually I think, this is my opinion, it's the most difficult to show the different how different factors overlapping is when you are examining a group which is considered to be more close to a norm. So, for instance, being a white women is considered, being a white women from a middle class, it's a little bit more close to the male norm, for instance, when we are studying career opportunities. Okay, so I think for this, it's enough to say what was said, but no, maybe one point that why is this intersectionality good for us? It's because it's pointing out that the women, they are not a homogeneous group. So there are different subgroups within the women, and of course the men as well. But that's why it's really important that intersectionality came into the pictures, because it shows that there are different way of inequalities among women as well. So we considered gender, biological sex, and intersectionality. And here I would like to highlight some point, because when you consider gender dimension into research, it's never about that. So it's never about that you want to highlight the difference between the women and men. And I think it's also an ethical question to consider, because at least for me, it's important that when you apply gender dimension, it's obviously you end up showing that there are differences between women and men. But so I want to say it's important that you never, so your only job is not only that you emphasize these differences, but you show that what the differences are caused. Because often the differences, what you see, the differences, it's not belong to the biological sex, but to the gender. So that's what is important here, that you show that how the differences became visible based on the gender. So how these are gender related. And of course, it's another, if we would like to connect the gender research with the equality and justice, this is also a way to show that to show how the opportunities are shaped. Again, this is much easier when you are involved in sociological research, to show that not so how the different opportunities came into the picture. So to show that it's how so for instance, the careers are not based merely on individual merits or on the system of meritocracy. So this is all about to show how women are valued, others perceive, what are their different experiences are based on, and how it is gender related. And as you see, I put a line here, the change in perspective from gender as an individual attribute to gender as an organizing system. So I think this is so of course you, especially if you are doing qualitative based research, in which often we are using interviews or focus groups. But I think what like really important is that even if you're examining individual attributes, gender, in connection to gender, you always say something about how the gender is organized as a structure or as a cultural factor. And it direct us to see that gender can operate on different levels. So you have to consider that what is the level you are examining. As researchers, you all know it, and how you can connect the gender dimension in the, let's say, the level of your research. So is it a cultural phenomenon, or is it an institutional level you are organizing? And for each of the level, there are the right gender concept that you can use. And here I also would like to reflect on something, which is on the researcher itself. So when someone is dealing with, I mean, using a gender analysis, it's, well, maybe it's more experienced by sociologists. So it's reflecting on yourself. So sometimes it can be hard to examine, I don't know, the opportunities in education or careers or gender roles, what society expect you as a woman, as a mother. So it can be really affect you individually. So it's always, I think, a job to distinguish between your own experiences and to fully concentrate on the data, what you collect. And it can be especially important to consider that what are your expectations on certain groups. So this can be included in a research which incorporating this gender dimension. So for instance, but it's really connected to the qualitative type of research. So for instance, when you sit down making an interview and the interviewee is acting like you have too many common things, maybe this person is not going to talk about something what you're really interested in as a researcher. So you have to consider this kind of levels, this kind of methods in your research as well. So everything, you have to connect everything. What you do in a research, you have to connect everything, how it connects to the gender dimension. And I again put a reflection question for you to hear, because it was a lot to tell about that. We can examine gender roles, gender relations. You can consider what are the expectations. So this is a very simple question, on already a lot is said about it. But so what do you think when we say that there are gender roles is expected from young women researchers? So what would you say, what could be these gender roles? And again, if you could put some answer into the chat about it. And thank you. And I see that we received another answer about that. What is the importance of gender? So your result can be very limited if you don't consider gender as a variable. Of course, yes. So the question is if you could share a few example that what gender roles is expected from a young women researchers, what we have to consider. Anyway, if you would like to implement the project. Yeah, often to consider a family situation. So this could be, as we all know, this could be really a serious changing point for women entrepreneurs when they are having their first child, for instance. And their family situation is considered, even if they have a family or not, work-life balance, social and emotional roles. That's very interesting. Yeah, empathy is really expected from women researchers. Both as researchers and educators, to be kind to others, yes, and so they can be really like evaluated differently if a woman is like really, let's say, appears as a competent, strict leader. It can be really like perceived differently if we are speaking a male or a female leadership. So young women researchers are often expected to be highly competent, productive. Yes, we can speak about the overproduction and being overcompetent as well, while at the same time modest and unassuming. Yes, exactly. There are lots of double bind situation. Women are more inclined to do it, to deal with it. They are frequently pushed into supportive or administrative roles instead of being recognized as leaders, and they're also expected to be pleasant, well presented. Yes, thank you, exactly. There are underlying assumptions that they will eventually balance their careers with family responsibilities. Yes, so it's the expectation that they are going to be the ones who will have to balance the work and life. These contradictory roles create pressure to be both excellent researchers and caring, adaptable colleagues. Yes, so we can see here it's not that only that they are expected to be the one who will deal much more with the work and life balance, but they have to be this caring, adaptable person at the workplaces. So in workplaces, so in this way to to perform domestic works as well and doing more administrative, more management type of works. Yeah, so thank you very much. These are all examples what can be considered. So this is what we mean on gender role. So maybe this was really basic for you, so sorry for that, but I think it's just good to reflect on that when you are considering to creating a research, these can be questions that you can consider. So you can consider the role you are assuming for researchers, for instance, in your research team. Okay, so we were speaking about gender intersectionality, and we arrived to the point when we can claim that when you integrate the gender dimension, we can speak about that you have a gender-sensitive research, which means that gender is consistently taken into account through the research project. And when you are when the gender itself is the subject in any kind of way, then we consider we are speaking about the gender-specific research. So for this webinar, we are talking about the gender-sensitive research. And here I also wanted to show you that there is a new expression, let's say, which is a more up-to-date expression to say that what kind of research you are doing when you are integrating the gender dimension is that we have to call it that you have to aim for an inclusive gender analysis in research and innovation. So this is the expression what the Horizon project are using. And it simply means everything what we have talked about it, but there is a plus factor in it, which is including diverse target groups and end users in research and innovation projects. So in a way, the methodology, the way how you're doing your research, its scope, it's a little bit broadened up. So this is really just to show you that it's not gender-sensitive research anymore, but it's inclusive gender analysis in research and innovation content. Okay, so the big question is here, the how to start. So when you have to integrate gender research, I think the first step is that you have to be convinced that there is a relevance of integrating gender research. I think without this, it cannot be done. So this is something you have to deal with as a research lead or as a researcher. And when you are done with this first step, then you have to reflect on your own biases. If you're not reflecting on your own biases as a researcher or in your research questions, then you will end up a gender blind research. And then due to that, you will end up not with a gendered innovation as the outcome of your research. So when you research have gender biases, I would say it's quite normal that all of our research is gender bias because we cannot we cannot avoid it, but you can work on it to have less gender biased research. And why I say that we cannot avoid it, because it's quite unintentional, because we are all socialized into our gender. And you have to constantly keep thinking that what can be your expectation, what you don't consider, what can be your prejudices, what you don't consider, how you are differentiate between women and men, what you are not, do it consciously. So basically, you have to think of what you assume automatically in a research, speaking of your research topic or your research team. And I put biases operating very early here because this is really about how we are socialized, at what kind of what kind of toys we are getting for Christmas when we are 1 year old, and what we are praised for by the teachers in the schools or in the kindergartens. So these biases, they are constantly influencing us as researchers. So you have to think of your biases. So that's why I wanted to also put this question for you here about the biases. Sorry. Yeah, so we are here. This is a very funny video about that, how difficult is it to always keep reminding us that we are living with our biases. So I try to run this video, and I will need someone to tell me if you can hear the voice, and it will start really quickly. So pay attention to the first sentence. Father. Okay, so I just stop here. Can please someone insert an answer to the chat if you can hear the voice of the video or not? Yes, you can. Okay, thank you. So let's see this video. It's very short and maybe you already know it. Father and son driving a car. They get into a car accident. The dad dies. Son gets rushed into A&E. Yeah. The surgeon says, "I cannot operate. This is my son." Who said, "Oh my gosh."
Well, it could be his biological father because he's adopted.
The father of the boy.
Goes a priest.
The surgeon's the dad.
The father.
Your father died, so yeah, can't be his father. It's down to God to say that.
God.
The wife had an affair with the surgeon. Either his stepfather or biological father, brother.
Version's the mother.
Oh my God, yeah! That makes no sense. Damn! Oh, that's annoying!
That's terrible, isn't it?
Oh.
Yeah, obviously.
Oh my gosh!
Okay.
Yeah, obviously, we all automatically assume that the surgeon's a man. Okay, so it wasn't about that how we researchers working with our own biases. It was about how biases works in the society. But I think it's a really good example that it's a bias what what different societies has about surgeons. So it's immediately considered, at least what we see, that a surgeon must be a man. Obviously, which is a very valid experience because most of the surgeons are men, and probably it is different if we are speaking about different type of surgeons. Okay, so when you are reflecting on your own biases, you have to ask these kind of questions: that what do you think, what kind of assumptions influence your perspective on your research topic or on your research question, or the way how you form your research team. So what can be your personal experiences that shape the way you see a certain situation, and what kind of hidden biases that could affect your decisions, and in what ways your background create blind spots that, given that you have an intersectional identity. So how this can contribute into having hidden biases that can affect your decisions on your research topic, for instance, or on the research questions. And again, please let's take some minutes with it. And if you can type me any experience regarding your own biases as a researcher into the chat, or just type an example that what do you think, what you have to consider when you design a research, what could be your assumption or your hidden bias. It doesn't have to be a general example, it can be something very concrete. So I just wait a few seconds to see. It's really hard. And it's usually this bias is discovered after you already done your research. But if you have any experience with it, just please give us some examples. One of my biases is that women are better at organizing things. Yes, exactly. This is a very good example. And they are multifunctional. That can be another bias as well. Okay, for instance, I can share that when I was conducting research about middle career women, I was exploring how organizational processes influence career improvement in large organizations. And I conducted interviews with women in leadership position, and I really expected them to advocate for gender equality, and I expected them to say lots of their experiences about discrimination, difficulties, challenges. And I ended up with women speaking of how brilliant, how successful they were. So this is really went against my expectation when in all the literatures I was reading about the difficulties and the challenges and how they are shaped by societal expectations and norms. Okay, and let's see one of my again. So organizing things. Women are more detailed oriented. Yes, exactly. I think this is really connected to the overcompensation, overperforming. I have several times heard women being complimented on their linguistic skills. Yeah, this is again something, a good example that what we think that what women are good in and what men are good in. And this is really difficult to argue against it because we have microdata, for instance, on how children perform in mathematics, how they perform in readings. But still, these society level things can be connected to gender as well. Okay, so thank you for the examples. And now I would like to continue with, sorry, I am really not good in this. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you. So we were speaking about that the first step is that you have to convince that this is important, this is relevant to integrate the gender dimension. And then the second step was that you have to look for your own biases, assumptions, and then you have to do the incorporating the gender dimension. So you have to find the methods how to do it. And here I would like to show you that there are already tools developed for it. And one of the I think the best tool is what was developed by two Horizon project. One is the Gendered Innovations 1 and the Gendered Innovations 2. So I just copied here the image of this project. So if you type gendered innovations, you will find this tool. These tools were designed not for researchers coming from the humanities, but more for like biologists or informatics. But still, I think it can be used by everyone. And what you see here is that they are really distinguished between what is analyzing gender, what is analyzing sex. And what you see here, it doesn't matter if you don't see what is exactly written, because what you have to see is what you have to understand that. So you see this, let's say this pizza form here, and there are different slides, and these different slides, they are representing different stages when you have to consider how you can analyze the gender in the specific stage in your research. So when you are identifying your problem you are going to study, then there are certain suggestions when you can consider. For instance, you have to let's see. So there is a suggestion here: perform literature searches with adequate terms for gender and sex. So when you are creating your research questions, research topic, you have to see that how the literature dealt with it. And then reflect upon your own gender assumption in research to the project. Yes, we already talked about it. And then let's see, the next stage is when you design the research. And here you will see different suggestions, what you have to consider and what you have to, when you collect data. For instance, it's not about collecting data from men and women, but you have to, for instance, ensure equal access for women and men and gender diverse individuals. Or, for instance, especially if you do a qualitative research, consider how gender relations between researchers and participants may impact data collection. And then during analysis and during dissemination, not only in terms of publishing your research results, but dissemination if you are working in a project and how you disseminate the different activities under dissemination. So this is something I really would like to suggest, to look for these tools. And then for our more interactive way of working together. So this is what I would like to suggest, that I collected two of these toolkits here, and I am just going to stop sharing the screen, and I am going to put these links to the chat, and I would like to everyone of this workshop to go to this link. This is a toolkit I am sharing, and just spend 5 minutes with it and go through some of it. So this is one toolkit I already entered into the chat, and the other one. Okay, so open one of these, and what you have to do is to think that what they show you, that how to incorporate the gender dimension. What are the key aspects and the elements and the areas to focus on? So what are these different stages? And gather examples from it, or collect tools, what they are recommending, what they are using. So please open these two links. You will find toolkits under these links. Okay, I am inserting the links once again to everyone. Thank you for notifying me. Okay, so you should see the links by now because I shared it with everyone. Okay, I would like to give you 5 minutes, and in the meantime, if you agree with it, I hope you are all agreeing with it, we will make you panelists. So it means that when you are coming back after your 5 minutes, you will be seen and you will be able to say what you want to say. But of course, you can switch off your audio or video as well. So I will call everyone again 12:05. Okay, so the 5 minutes passed, and just to share again that I'm going to switch all of you into the panelist mode. And as I know, you have to accept it. So if you don't want to accept it, then it's okay. I have to do it one by one, so it takes a little time. We are all together here with you, 14, so it doesn't take that long. Okay, so thank you those who joined as panelists. So now you can switch on your audio and video if you want. Those who remained in the attendee function, you can use the chat with us. Hello to everyone who joins us. The question was that to visit this toolkit and to gather that how the gender and how the sex factors can be relevant, can be related to a research. So here we are interested in what you collected, what kind of examples, and what are the different phases that have to be considered. So anything what you think it's important to share about that, how to incorporate this gender dimension, so what it means. So please, whoever would like to start, just switch on your voice and we can together collect some important aspects. So any ideas you think it's important? Okay, if not, so this is not like a pressure. So I will just reshare my presentation, maybe receive something. Sorry, I need to leave. Yes, of course, those who have to leave, thank you for being here. So let's see what I collected here for you. So I'm just going to reshare my presentation. Okay, so this was the two toolkit I shared with you. This is something. So these 3 toolkits. This is something I am really recommending to use if you, as someone as a starter, has to apply this gender dimension. But I doubt that it will. So there would be so much a beginner, some of you. So when we are speaking about integrating gender dimension, basically we are speaking about integrating gender into research, and we are integrating gender into project design implementation. And for many of the project, it means to ensure the stronger presence of women in subgroups in leadership position. And when you have to consider gender into research, you have to at least consider these steps. When formulating your research questions, you have to think of what is the gender relevance. If you are asking the right questions, you have to consider the composition of your research team, your project team. You have to think of how you will organize the work. We were speaking about the biases, and lots of examples were mentioned about that, how women are expected, what kind of work women are expected to do and how they are expected to behave in the workplace to be more friendly, more team player. And then you have to consider the gender dimension in the research methods, data collection, and in the analysis. And then you have to consider the gender dimension in presenting the research results, which means all level of communication about your research findings. So the science communication, the publication, and the dissemination. And then you have to consider it in the reporting phase. And so this is only a very basic list of how and in what phases you have to consider gender dimension. And I try to elaborate more for each of these phase. So for integrating gender into research. So basically, it just almost like a repetition of what was said so far. But what is important that you are considering gender dimension from the very first start. You are starting to setting up your research goals, your research topic, till the very end of the evaluation of the research and the reporting phases. So here, you will find examples. So you will see that you can consider what is said in the literature review, how you will gather on sex disaggregated data, what you have to consider when you develop your methodologies. And then going on, you have different steps you have to consider when you design your project, your research project, and implement it. Especially it is connected that you are implementing an EU-funded project. So other than ensuring or working on to ensure the gender balance in your research teams, because sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's not about that there are less women in your research team. So what other things what you can consider? It is often listed in proposals that research teams are trying to ensure that the panels at the conferences are gender balanced. And then you can work on building the capacity in your research team on how to do sex and gender analysis. So you can work on how to improve the capacities of your researchers. And then in your project, you can build in that you're improving awareness, which can be connected into the science communication, so the communication to the public about your gender dimension in the research. You can consider how will you how you will present the knowledge what you found and how it contributes to the overall knowledge on gender. So there are lots of ways how to incorporate the gender dimension in the project design. And don't forget about the working culture. You have to constantly deal with the and form and shape the working culture within your research team. And then, so I wanted to take a few minutes on that, how difficult it is to shape everything on an institutional level. So this is initially the gender equality plans about. And so the gender equality plans, the goal is that you reach a change, an institutional level change. This is really well communicated under the requirements for the Horizon Gender Equality Plan, so the gender equality plans that has to be submitted for the Horizons. And for this, it's a very good, actually, it's really good to study those requirements, because this gender equality plan is really about that you have to start with examining your institutions you are working in. So you have to see what is the state of art of the equality, of the gender equality in your institutions. And when you have to have, let's say, a picture of the gender equality in your institutions, you have to define what is your aim, what is your objectives, and you have to use an impact assessment because you have to monitor how you achieve changes in your institutions. And so it's very easy to mark activities towards improving gender equality with saying that we are would like to work on improving the gender balance in certain aspects of research work. So once someone starts to examine the state of art, and especially those who are already like working in this field, so there are lots of type of discrimination, segregation, difficulties, which is connected to all kind of things. And one area which is less discussed usually in the gender equality plans as well is the gender-based violence. So I just would like to highlight that there can be very sensitive issues to face when you are working on the gender equality dimension as an organizational issue. And I also listed some of the I don't know how to say, some recommendations. So some of the activities, what you can do when you are not merely focusing the gender dimension in the research, but gender dimension in project implementation. So, and if you want to do something other than promising that you will have a gender balance panel. As we are really arriving towards the end of this workshop, I'm not going to detail this. But then one thing I would like to show you is that there was a workshop at the Cost Action Program in Brussels in summer. I think it was in June or July. And as a result of this workshop, the Cost Action published these 10 tips for your gender equality plan. And I think this is something worth to visit because these 10 tips, they are like realistic recommendation what you can do for your project implementation if you would like to consider maintaining gender equality within your project. And these are really good tips for creating your new gender equality plan as well. And so by the end, I wanted to provide an example, but first, there is a question. So then let's see the question first. Magdalena, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so I am my sort of angle to this now is that I'm coordinating a network of young researchers. So we're about to define the several different interconnected projects, and we're very conscious of applying a gender perspective on this. But it's not gender specific research. So I wonder how do we define the metrics for an impact assessment without turning this into a gender specific research project too much, because we don't have we don't have that much sort of space to divert too much of the resources into doing actual gender specific research in this case.
Okay, so you're saying you don't have resources to see what is the impact on women or what is the impact on men?
Well, I wonder how we define what to assess. We're sort of going into a more technical area, and how do we how do we know that we measure the right things? That we look for the right things, we ask the right questions without turning it into a research project in itself. I mean, we can do some literature search, but I think there is not so much done in this area.
Okay, I think in this case, I think it's enough if you just see what are the different impacts for women and men. So you don't have to have specific questions for the impact assessment, but in your results, you will see if there are different effects on women and men. I think in this case, this is enough. And especially if you have, so it's depending on what kind of tools you are using. But for instance, if you have a focus group, you can consider, so for instance, you're applying focus groups, you can consider if you, for some reason, is it good to do an only women group or an only women group and only men group? Like, for instance, if it's a sensitive, you have some, your topic involves sensitivity for in any kind of like aspect, what you think, what you already know that can be a sensitive issue for women. So then, for instance, you can consider to create women-only groups for if you're applying focus groups.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Good
So
suggestion.
this kind of
Yes,
kind of things, but you
Okay.
can.
So that's going from this current situation just one step in the right direction is what we have to do, I guess.
Yeah. Yes.
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 Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so let me just, I'm still sharing, okay. So I was saying about that I prepared an example. This is from one of my research, and I don't know if you would like to please tell me if you still have time and energy to follow it, because I can summarize it in a few minutes. Okay, so this is a research I have done within a bigger research because I was examining the middle level career progress of women in large organizations. And I just wanted to show that what a gender analysis can mean for a research, but this is a sociological research, so it's very easy to apply gender lens in this kind of research. So what I was doing, I wanted to see what are the biases and hidden biases, hidden contradictions for the part-time working women in leadership roles in a large family. So it was an ethnographic research I was doing, and I was exploring that what are the organizational practices and processes that define the career development opportunities for women. And within this larger question, I ended up seeing that there was part-time opportunities for women in this large firm I was entering in as a researcher, but I found that there was a contradiction in the terms. Actually, I listed it under my findings. So I witnessed that there was this narrative, there was discussion, it was shared by the HR professions that there is part-time, and they were like really advocating for it, and company even won an award for being a family-friendly company. But what I found that part-time working women were very rare. So I was not merely looking for that how many women worked in part-time jobs. I was speaking with those women working in part-time jobs, and I was seeing that how their part-time work was understood and how it affected how they can achieve to end up being in a part-time work. And of course, I was studying, I wanted to see that how these women talked about their part-time work. So how they narrate it, what they shared about their experience in working in part-time work. And at that time, I thought it's interesting because there was societal level advocacy for part-time work still, like in most of the countries in Hungary, but it's already well known that there are lots of controversies about the part-time work because it can improve women careers as much as it can decrease their career opportunities. So it can be a supporting factors, but at the same time, it can be a burden for women to work in part-time work. So I wanted to see how it works in a certain organization. And so what I found is not, and what I found and how I could speak about it is not simply, as I said, talk about that, what is the organizational narration, discourse about the part-time work, because that was obvious. It was presented as a very positive, atypical employment for women, and they expressed that they were really wanted to go for it. So it was expressed that they providing this part-time job for the women employers. So then it turned out that the condition for receiving a part-time work, there were certain factors what these women needed to fulfill. First of all, it was always based on informal negotiations between the superior and women who wanted to work in part-time work. And it's often these women, and that's why it was another factor that they were already full-time employment in the company. So at that time, it was back in the 26 and 27 when I had this research. So at that time, I didn't find any woman who ended up in a part-time work. Why not worked before, not worked at the company before going on maternity leave? So these were all women already worked full-time employers at the company, and they were returning from their maternity leave. And another important factor that they have to be supported, a direct support from their supervisors. So without supervisors, and it was part of this informal negotiation process, no one received the part-time work. So although it was really like the discourse on this was that, yes, we have part-time work, there was not like a simple formal way of ending up in a part-time position for women. And then I was studying that what is the career impact of working in the part-time work. So it is often, so there are, at that time, there was a lot of finding about that how part-time work make it more difficult to women to develop, to progress in their career ladder. So then I found that part-time work was often seen as a lack of ambition in career, and it was very much connected to this expectation and this, let's say, bias that this is connected to what is called in intensive motherhood or intensive parenthood. So it was seen that the women who worked in part-time work, it's because they want to concentrate much more or more on their being of the motherhood. And it was not considered that they want to work in part-time work because their job, their profession is the same importance for them than their motherhood and or their duties of performing their domestic works. I also found that part-time work was like non-existent for those women who were part of the higher management. So there was like a glass ceiling for the part-time worker, and it was really the same when we are speaking about the glass ceiling in regards of the career. So there was no any intense example I found that women with a higher leadership level worked in part-time work, although I heard it from interviews that there was some women who wanted to work in part-time, already being as a senior manager coming back from maternity leave, but it was not allowed to them. So what I found, at least, so this was like the result of my analysis with this gender lens, that the part-time work, the discourse, the narrative about the part-time work was easily connected, can be easily connected to this idle worker concept from Joan Ecker. And the part-time works shaped the role of women in the company. So part-time work just contributed to shaping the role and the expectations on women in this organization. And it was very connected, strongly connected to this expectation of the intensive motherhood. And this is not something what women acknowledged or the women were speaking of it. This is something, as a researcher, I had to dig it up. So it was not it was not that the women in interview directly speaking about that they are experiencing part-time work as a difficulty or as a challenge. They also really praised. They were really like thankful to the organization that they were let to work in part-time work. So part-time work, this is, I think, the finding is really important because part-time work was sold like a family-friendly tool, like a tool helping to improve the gender equality in the company. But at the same time, it was not a tool, or it didn't impact anything in the organizational culture. So this is what a gender lens. So when you're applying a gender analysis in a research, but it's much, as I said, it's much more easier if you are doing as a sociologist. Okay, so by the end of this workshop, we are still a few here. I collected some questions which I think can be considered, or we can discuss about it. And I also inserted a question. You see this. This is a question I received for a roundtable discussion. I soon will participate. So I just put it here for you if you want to reflect on it, because I think this is a good question. So we can speak about the reluctance, the negative attitude toward gender equality among colleagues or on institutional level, how to convince senior managers, if you have any success story to share, or any good examples. So, and this is the question to talk about in upcoming roundtable. If an EU or national policymakers were in this room, what would be your single non-negotiable demand to ensure quality plans are not just tick box exercises from your experience and context? So what do you think, what is the best to do in your institution if you would like to achieve for the sake of gender equality, or like what would be the best next step to do? I really would like to hear about the reluctance. And what do you experience about the attitude of integrating gender dimension? I'm sure we are all facing a lot of reluctance. It just sometimes it's really like difficult to mention concrete examples because these are working on one hand an unconscious level and they are really invisible. I mean, sometimes it's really hard to recognize them. That where are the difficulties? Because yeah, maybe Magdalena.
Yeah, I have a sense. So I live and work in Sweden these days, and I have a sense that there's a little tend to backlash, political correctness, a little wokeism. Like yeah, we all know this, and we've kept doing this for a long time, and a little bit of there's not a lot of appetite in some, at least among some people, to push this further because it's kind of getting old, maybe with some groups. I don't know if anybody else feels anything similar to that.
Yeah, this is actually what we often hear from researchers from the Nordic European countries. And I often hear that we have the gender equality plan. So yes, we done it and it's all good. Okay, Anna, do you have something to share?
Yes, I'm mostly responding to Magdalena. We work in very, very different contexts. I'm from Romania, and what I also observe here that on the one hand we do not have the experience, so we don't know what exactly it would mean to do gender equality on an institutional level. But then again, we also have the backlash without the experience. So we cannot say we've done it, but we can say it's not worth it, right? So when it comes to reluctance, many times I face stuff like, I don't know, we hire people based on merit, not on their gender. This is a quote unquote. So, you know, these type of very anti-woke, anti-DEI type of discourses have managed to convince even people in the academia that this is what it means to do DEI. Of course, wrongly, because obviously this is not accurate. This is not how we do this. We don't take somebody because they're a woman. They have to be just as qualified as anybody else, right? So it's kind of hard, and it's also, of course, a very political subject, and that's not helpful at all. The fact that the political right is building a whole solidarity strategy about being anti-gender, anti-trans, anti-anything that mentions the word gender is not really helpful in most of the context. Because first you have to do a lot of deconstruction of these walls. So there's lots of reluctance coming from many different places.
Yes, we didn't, with reason, I didn't touch this topic that we are all, well, at least maybe I can also share that coming from a Central Eastern European countries, we are all experiencing this political context around everything which is connected to gender. I mean, it's a political context in Norway as well, but maybe from a different angle. Yeah, so that's something we also have to consider here. But I'm glad you mentioned that. You were talking about convincing. So yeah, I think that's why I said that this is the very first step, that you have to convince everyone you're working with that there is an importance. Otherwise, it will just remain a ticking the box exercise. And so let's see, and then we will close the workshop. Thank you very much for your contributions. So we received that So a gender equality plan has been developed in our organization. Thank you, Milka, for sharing your comment. And women hold a significant share of important positions, which is also partly related to the nature of the health profession. Yes. Importantly, there are no negative attitudes regarding women's participation or leadership within the institution. Yeah, it's good to hear that where you work, you do not experience negative attitudes regarding women's participation on leadership within your institution. It's really good to hear that there are women who are not like living, let's say, for instance, daily on a pressure that they are working in male groups. There are very different experiences of women who are working within a mainly women group or male group. So it's another big issue what we would open up, because here we would need to speak of gender segregation and horizontal segregation. So we would really need to distinguish between these things. But so thank you very much. Of course, it's not only that when we are speaking about gender equality, it's not only that we are always facing difficulties and challenges. Of course, we are all like enjoying our professions, and we are like it's not always, so we don't have to always speak about that, how it is to work in a research organization as a woman. Okay, so as a sociologist and working on female-dominated topics in Brussels, I have little to share from my own experience. Thank you for the workshop. Okay, thank you. Milka, what type of organizations is yours? Organization is yours. There was a question, but I think it referred to another comment. Yeah, Public Health Institute, thank you. Okay, I want to advise, when preparing a project, is it better to focus or mention only in gender inclusion, or maybe in gender and sex inclusion? So it's a question or an advice. Regarding this, I'm using the expression gender dimension because this is what is used from the documents in the project proposal, handbooks, working books, and the documents published by the EU Commission. So what you will see there is the gender. They use this gender dimension. You can use gender perspective. So preparing a project is better to focus or mention only in gender inclusion, or maybe gender and sex inclusion. Okay, your question referred to another thing. So this is something you have to decide if you need to consider the sex inclusion and or the gender dimension, the gender factor. So this is something which is really connected to your research topic. And I think it's really connected to what field of research you are working in, because as I said, it's much easier to connect the gender dimension if you are working in the field of sociology or history or but since for instance, in the Horizon project, the dissemination of your research result is connected to the requirement of doing an excellent research. I think if it's really you see it's really difficult to incorporate this gender dimension in your specific research. So in your research